and PIA, along with AUP, for organizing this important event. I want to thank you guys for sticking it out in the rain, to stand up for what you believe in, stand up for a principle that matters. And on a personal note, I want to take this opportunity to go a little off script and thank two groups. First, I want to thank the real opposition in this province, the Alberta New Democrat Caucus. We got all 4 members of the caucus here. And you know, there are other MLAs working in the legislature for us right now, but there was only one party that voted against the Conservatives when they voted to impose an agreement on the teachers last week, and that was the New Democrat Caucus. And also on a personal note, I see several members of Local 3, the correctional officers in the audience, and on behalf of the broader labor movement, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you guys for standing up for workplace health and safety the way you did. It was brave, it was courageous, it was the right thing to do, and we're proud of you. So I'm here this afternoon wearing 2 hats. First, as President of the Federation of Labour, our organization has been working with PIA and AUP and others to raise concerns about what's happening to our public services. But I'm also here as co-chair of a coalition called Better Way Alberta. You may have heard of it. You may have seen the advertisements that we've produced. How many people have seen the video ad that we've produced? It's been running in front of first-run movies and theaters across the province. And it's a funny ad. And it's deliberately designed to use humor to open up a conversation on something that's very serious. But let's be straight about this. The ad is funny, but the subject is not at all a laughing matter, because what we're talking about is the future of our core public services, the services that are provided to our students, to our seniors, to the most vulnerable among us. And what we've heard today and what we've seen across this province is that as a result of the March 7th budget, all of those services that form the fabric that helps knit our communities together, all of those services are in jeopardy. And we should be angry because those services are being undermined, but we should be outraged because there's no good reason for them to be undermined. You know, governments have obligations. They need to ask questions, and they need to make choices. And with this government, despite the fact that they presented themselves during the last election campaign as a new kind of conservative party, as a return to a progressive conservative party, it's become clear that they're asking the same old questions and coming to the same old conclusions. So instead of asking the question, you know, we have a budget deficit now, where do we cut? The real question that this government should be asking, and which Alberta should be asking, is why the hell, in a province as wealthy as Alberta, do we have a deficit in the first place? Because they've come to the conclusion that they have a deficit, so therefore they have to cut. And they've also been making the argument, which is not based on any fact, that the deficit is the result of spending on public services. So I'm here today to tell you that they're spinning a lie. And through our campaign, the Better Way Alberta campaign, we're trying to make sure that Albertans understand that this government is spinning a lie. Because that deficit that they're using as an excuse to cut the services that we need as a province, that deficit was not created by uncontrolled spending on public services. So you've all heard the story that Alberta spends more on public services than any other province. Honestly, I wish it were true, and in a province as wealthy as Alberta we probably could, but the reality is we're rich like Saudi Arabia, yes, but we spend like New Brunswick on our public services. So we're not number one in terms of public spending. Even before the cuts, we were not number one. We were not number two. We were not number three. We were not number four. We were number 5 in terms of how much we spend on the public services that matter to Albertans. Okay, so we're number 1 in terms of wealth, number 5 in terms of spending. So when the government says that the cupboard is bare and that we have no choice but to cut spending for these vital public services, the reality is that the cupboard is bare because this government and this party has made it bare through their choices. As a result of 25 years of irresponsible cuts to taxes and royalties, they've blown a hole in the revenue base that we need to fund our vital public services. So the solution is not to blow more holes in those public services. The solution is to fix the hole. And we fix the hole by getting rid of the flat tax. We fix the hole by introducing a progressive tax. We fix the hole by returning our corporate tax to where it was even when Ralph Klein was Premier. We had a 15% corporate tax when Ralph Klein was Premier. It's 10% now, the lowest in the country. And at the same time, we're giving away our resource riches. We don't even have to increase royalty rates. If this government actually met its own targets in terms of collecting revenue from the sale of our collectively owned resources, if they met their own targets, we would have generated $37 billion more in revenue over the last 10 years. So think about that. Let's do some math. If we had a progressive tax system in this province, like Ralph Klein had, like Peter Lougheed had, we'd have another $3 billion a year. If we had a 15% corporate tax like we had when Ralph Klein was Premier, we'd have another $2.5 billion per year. And if we actually set their own, if we had a government that met their own targets in terms of revenue collection, we'd have $37 billion more. So we have a $3 billion deficit right now, which they're using to justify brutal, massive, unnecessary cuts. But taking those 3 small measures, which is really just returning to us to where we were 10 years ago, the deficit would disappear, and not only that, we would have surpluses. Okay? So when these guys say that they have no alternative, the reality is that they have an alternative. They have a choice, and unfortunately they've made a choice to go after our services and the weakest among us, as opposed to doing what they should do and actually have a reasonable revenue system for collecting revenue to pay for our public services. So you know what, I'm getting to the point now with this government and their broken promises that it's not just about talking to them. We need to talk, we need to convince them, we need to lay out the facts, but at the end of the day, you can only do so much to make these guys see the light, but if they don't see the light, we have to make them feel the heat, okay? And so I'm just going to wrap up by saying that our job going forward as a labor movement and as a progressive community that cares about our public services, our job now is to turn up the heat at rallies like this, at conversations in our workplaces, with our friends, our families, and I'm going to tell you that our Federation of Labour, along with the unions that are members of our federation, including the nurses who are here, Canadian Union of Public Employees, Health Sciences Association of Alberta, we're actually going to be targeting ridings. We're going to go door to door with the message about fair taxes, fair royalties for quality public services, and so they may not see the light, but they're going to feel the heat. Thank you for being here. It doesn't stop here. It continues until the next election. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gil. That's awesome. We're going to make them feel the heat.